You are listening to the Overcome Pornography for Good podcast, episode 204, What to Do When You're Overwhelmed. Welcome to the Overcome Pornography for Good podcast, where we take a research-based, trauma-informed, and results-focused approach to quitting porn. This approach has been revolutionary and changed thousands and thousands of lives. I'm your host, Sarah Brewer. Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast episode. You're going to have to excuse my voice. It's pretty rough. Man, I was doing so well on Friday. I was out on a run and just having a really great day and up and at it. And Saturday hit and it was just like we got hit by a bus. Well, that's how I felt. I got hit by a bus and just totally legs swept underneath me, out from underneath me. So sick. So sick. I didn't actually get hit by a bus, but just so sick. And we have the flu. When I say we, I'm talking about my family and I. So got the flu and pneumonia, and it's just been rough. But I am feeling good enough to record today. My voice is just a little scratchy, so hopefully it's not too annoying. I'm excited to talk about our episode today, which is all about overwhelm. Before we do that, it's been a while since I've shared podcast reviews that I've really appreciated and seen in here. So let me just share a couple of those and just say thank you to those of you who have left me a review on the podcast. This one looks like my most recent one. It says, Sarah offers such great content on interrupting the shame cycle and maintaining hope. Her positivity is contagious, measuring success based on how many urges we process mindfully rather than whether we gave in or not is a game changer. Research shows that the better we get at recognizing and managing emotions, the more able we are to avoid compulsive behaviors. And Sarah is a compassionate guide in the development of those skills as well. I'm amazed at how much is offered free here rather than behind a paywall. For my psychotherapy clients struggling with pornography, this is one of the resources I recommend most highly. Yeah, thank you so much for whoever you are that left this review. I really appreciate it. Like I said, these help me get my message out there, the more that, it gets high ratings. And so just thank you. I appreciate it. I love when I hear therapists recommending my content. I hear that a lot. It's how a lot of people discover what we're doing over here at the Center for Overcoming Pornography. So thank you. We'll also share this one. It says, I've been through recovery programs, therapy, and counseling alike. This is a one-of-a-kind podcast full of compassion, understanding, research, and humanity on a topic so few are willing to talk about. It helps not just for pornography, but all habits in life in general. I'm so grateful she has been and continues recording these. Apart from God, it became my source of hope that change is possible. Yeah, thank you so much. Lately, we're 205 episodes in, and it's not as easy as it was for me to record podcasts as it was maybe like the first 175. I've started to have to think of ways to keep showing up here. So you letting me know that, you're getting value from it is, really helpful. So thank you. Thank you so much for that. And so with that said, what you'll notice is that I am starting to do podcast lives. And so that's where I'm teaching live on a live stream, just, for whoever wants to come and join, you're welcome to. The best way to get on the schedule and to know when I'm doing those podcast lives is to get on our email list. And so you can do that by going to centerforovercoming.com if you're not already. And then if you even want to just email us support@sarahbrewer.com and just ask, hey, how can I join the list for the podcast lives? You can do that. Those are really great because in those you have opportunities to ask me questions and, I get to interact with you a little bit more one-on-one. And so you'll start seeing we're going to be posting a few more podcast live episodes here. And so even if you're listening on the podcast and you're not at the live event, it's still going to be just as valuable as these episodes where I'm just talking to myself in a microphone. Ideally, even more valuable because there is that aspect of bringing in questions as they're coming in. Let's dive into our content today. Overwhelm. So this is a big one. And this came up actually in our coaching call this last week in the program. Just members saying, what do I do when I'm overwhelmed? And I almost feel like this time of year sometimes brings the overwhelm with it. Do you guys feel that? I mean, December, there's so much going on in December. We're all trying to fit in company parties and family parties. And then there's getting ready for the holidays. And There can be stress around money or stress around relationships. And, there's just a million things to do. And sometimes we get to December and we feel like, what did I do with my year? And we can start to get down on ourselves if we're not, intentionally trying to create a culture within ourselves of celebrating ourselves and, not basing our worth off of what we've accomplished. Sometimes some of that emotion can come in. And anyways, overwhelm seems to be kind of a big one. Overwhelm, it really can keep us in the spirals. It can keep us in shame spirals. It can also, of course, really keeps us from taking action. When we are overwhelmed, we don't do more things. When we're overwhelmed, we do less things and just spin and feel like garbage while we're doing less things. To me, overwhelm, it feels really cloudy. It feels like a heavy, dark cloud that kind of just covers everything. It feels like noise that can't be quieted. When I was meditating earlier this week, working through a little bit of overwhelm, the image that just kept coming to my mind when I was meditating is I have like my clear center, I have my peaceful center, but the overwhelm is just like a staticky, like 1,000 little things keeping me from that clear center. Overwhelm, if you're trying to quit porn, what overwhelm might look like for you is just, oh my gosh, there's so much to do and I'm not going to be able to do it all. This is such a big problem. This is such a huge thing in my life. I can't even imagine tackling it. I can't imagine fixing it or solving it. It's too big. It's too big. And then you start to spin and stress out. And, it's really, doesn't feel good. It's overwhelming. It's a lot. And so we worked on this in our coaching call this last week. And I thought it'd be a great topic to bring up today in the podcast. So let's talk triggers for overwhelm. And the more we can understand what triggers our overwhelm, the more clarity we have around it, the more power we have around it. And then we'll get into some principles to help us with the overwhelm. And then I'll give you a specific exercise. Okay. So triggers for overwhelm. One trigger for overwhelm can be perfectionism. If you are a perfectionist, like many of us are, this can really trigger overwhelm. This idea that you have to do everything right and you have to do it right away. Perfectionism, I really want us to change the narrative on perfectionism because we glorify perfectionism. But really what perfectionism is perfectionism is fear of failure. Perfectionism is just the part of you that is afraid to fail. Perfectionism doesn't typically make you really good at something. It's just the part of you that is really afraid to fail. And everything that you might say is good that comes out of your perfectionism, for example, like maybe you're really meticulous with your projects and maybe you say that your perfectionism helps you have these really perfect projects. Other triggers for overwhelm can be overthinking. So really trying to overthink your way out of a problem. I do this a lot where if there's a problem in my mind, I just overthink it and overthink it and overthink it and think about every single different potential that we could do. And I have to think about this. So, if we're hiring someone to help us around the house and someone to help, like a nanny to pick up my daughter from preschool and help out for a few hours, it's like instead of keeping it as simple as possible, I'm overthinking it. Well, we have to think about this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And there's a point where, it's good to think about all the different things that you want in your mind. But when you're then thinking about, well, what about a year from now? What is going to happen? Who do we need to hire for a year from now? Because this is what's going to be happening in 1 year, right? Which is what my brain does. That's when it gets messy and problematic. Overthinking, I'm overthinking it. And so instead of overthinking and trying to make sure you have all of the right steps in your mind, right? Overthinking often looks like, well, I'm going to think about every single problem that could potentially come up and I'm going to solve it right now. Overthinking can be, I just need to know the next step. I don't need to know the next 10 steps. I don't need to know what's going to happen in a month. I just need to know the next step today. Even saying that, I can feel my body relax. Okay, I don't have to know exactly how I'm going to get there. I don't have to know exactly, every single tiny step I'm going to take, but I do just need to know the next step today. And I know what that next step is today. We always know what our next step is. If you're wanting to quit porn and you're in the program, maybe that next step is I just need to reach out to ask a coach to help me choose a milestone. Or maybe it's I just need to do this next worksheet. this next video training, whatever that is for you. If you're not in the program, maybe your next step is I just need to look into some professional help. Do I want to get professional help and consider getting some professional help there? Or maybe your next step is doing a little bit more research around different modalities and what is really going to be the most useful thing for you to do with quitting porn. I've got a great research page on that. If any of you want to go check that out, can learn about, what this research shows us really is the most helpful tools when it comes to quitting porn. Another trigger for overwhelm is feeling out of control. This is a big one. We can often forget that we have control when something big happens and, start to spiral and we feel really out of control. This is a big one with pornography too, right? How many of you have felt that way? Well, throughout my day, I was doing really well. I was having a really good week. And then I don't know, for whatever reason, I just had a bad couple of hours and it just felt out of my control. I just viewed I didn't want to, but I did. I went back to it. I want to challenge you to, instead of falling into the feeling out of control spiral feeling, to breathe, offer yourself compassion, remind yourself you don't have to be perfect. Remind yourself this doesn't have to be solved right this minute, and break this down into tiny baby steps. This is what we do a lot in coaching. So if you are in the program and you're feeling this out of control, come to a coaching call and let us help you and walk you through it and help you decide what are these tiny baby steps for you specifically. Some ideas, if you're not in the program and are still working through this, one way that I like to look at this is after the event of you slipping up with pornography. Let's say you slip up. What's happening after that event? After that event, are you falling into a deep shame spiral? Are you falling into binge-like behaviors that oh, well, I already viewed, so I might as well view again. Or, I'll start over again on Monday. If you're falling into those types of patterns or in the shame spiral patterns, I would want to work on shame with you first. If you feel like you've kind of got that figured out, you're not falling into shame spirals, you're not stuck in the all or nothing thinking, then we can look at before the event and kind of see, well, what was going on? What were the emotions you were feeling? What was the, overwhelming emotional state that might have led to some buffering? Were there witching hours? There's some other things that we can pick apart there. So instead of feeling out of control, just breaking it down into the next tiny baby steps. Maybe that next tiny baby step for you is talking to someone. And just continuing to remind yourself that even though I feel out of control, that doesn't mean I am out of control. Okay. Even though that was a really difficult moment and I slipped up, that's okay. And that doesn't mean that I'm always out of control around this. All of us are out of control every now and then, and that's okay. We don't have to make that mean something, a lot bigger than this smaller moment. This smaller moment of feeling out of control, that's okay. Let's love it. Let's leave it at that. And let's not make that our whole entire experience and expand that bigger than it needs to be. Another trigger for overwhelm is comparison or jealousy of someone else and someone else's progress. As inspiring as our What's Possible interviews are, which we haven't done any in a while, and we're just getting some set up to do more. I really do love those. It's just we haven't prioritized them, but we'll be doing quite a bit more of those. And in fact, I think I'm going to have Hunter record and do some of those interviews. They're going to be awesome. But, occasionally, I find people are using those What's Possible interviews almost to compare themselves to it. And that can get them stuck in some overwhelm as well. I'm not there. I should be there. Maybe even feelings of jealousy. I wish I was there. That can be a big trigger for overwhelm. And so instead, I want us to look at comparison and jealousy instead of in a negative light. I want us to consider looking at it like it's just your higher self showing you what you want and what's possible for you. So instead of comparing yourself and being down on yourself, practice loving yourself and being grateful and for seeing what is possible for you. Thank you, body, soul, for being a little bit jealous here because you're showing me what I really want and ultimately what's really possible for me. And how awesome is that? And then it kind of takes the negative comparison feelings from the other person. And instead we can look at that other person and say, thank you, other person, for showing me what is possible for me and for what my soul really does want. And then start building towards that. So many of us shame jealousy and shame comparison like they're bad. They're bad parts of us. But what if they weren't bad? What if it was just a part of you that was showing you something that you really, really wanted? Like, thank you for reminding me what I really want. That way I can look at my priorities and make sure that my priorities are correct. Or, there's so many different ways we can look at this. If the jealousy is maybe rooted in something that doesn't quite align with your values, for example, maybe you just feel a lot of comparison and jealousy around your neighbor and how much money they have compared to how much money you have. All that is it's just a little signal, a little sign for you, showing you what is valuable to you and what's important to you. And instead of hating that part, you can learn from it and say, okay, wow, it looks like I really do value money. I wonder why. And then you can dive into that more. It's not a bad thing. Do you value the safety that money provides? Or do you think that, money gives you more status and makes you a more important person or a more likable person or a more successful person? If those are the beliefs behind it, it might be something that we want to look at and kind of pull apart a little bit. Might not lead to, your highest happiness. So if you're feeling the comparison jealousy and that's triggering the overwhelm, one tool I want you to use here is consider extending your time frame. Instead of, if you join the program and you're like, I'm going to complete it all within 1 month, that could probably bring some overwhelm. Instead, can we look at 6 months or even a year or 8 months? Can we extend the time frame here and break it up a little bit more? That can really decrease overwhelm and help us stay in control. Okay, a few other principles around overwhelm. I'm going to have to finish these kind of quickly because my voice is going away. Choosing 1% growth over 100% growth, or 1% growth over 5% growth, or 20%, or 50%, or 80%, but 1%, not 5%, 1%, not 100%. What I'm saying here is choosing to grow in tiny little increments, in 1% increments. In fact, this is a concept I used when I was doing my podcast, because especially when I first started, I was so overwhelmed because there were a million things I wanted to teach. And so I had a sticky note here on my computer that just said, if you can help someone just be 1% better, just feel and heal 1% more, then you've done your job, just 1%. And what that's done is it's compounded into so much goodness. So this is the principle behind 1% growth. Is not only is it manageable and the pace is manageable and it reduces the risk of burnout, but it creates momentum and a lot of compounding growth. So compounding growth is when your resource, if we're thinking about this like money, your resource, your money, it doesn't only grow by the principal amount, but also from the accumulated growth from previous periods. So think of like a snowball. The snowball starts rolling down the hill and it's getting bigger and bigger because it's snowballing off of the snow that it gathered from the previous roll, not just from how big the snowball was from at the beginning of the hill. And compounding growth can lead to bigger growth over time. So let me give another money example. Compounding growth looks like if you have $100 and you decided to invest it, and let's say it grows by 10% every year, the first year it's going to grow by 10%, so it's going to be at 110. The second year it's going to grow 10% off of the 110, not off of the 100 that you originally put it. It's going to grow 10% off of what you had at the end of the first year. And so that year you make $11 more instead of $10 more the year before. And then the third year, it's going to grow off of the $121 that you had the second year. You're going to grow a little bit more than $12 that year. But do you see how you're growing more and more and faster because of this idea of compound growth? And so that's the principle of 1% growth. If we can just stay really steady and really consistent with 1% growth, You'll be amazed at what you can accomplish in the long term. This requires you getting out of short-term thinking, which is, I'm going to give this my all for 1 month. And instead, we're really trying to take a deeper, more holistic approach, which is not just how can I quit porn for a month or 60 days or whatever, but how can I do inner healing work to really heal this part of me that is so distressed by this and feels so out of control here? How can I get this control back? And that's by little tiny 1% increments over and over and over and over again. I feel like I need to explain the money part again better, but I think you get the idea. And if you want a better example of compound growth specifically, with investing in money, just go ask ChatGPT to explain it to you. Okay, so 1% growth. And if you do any more growth, awesome. Anything else is just bonus, but you're only requiring 1% from yourself. That's going to get us out of overwhelm. All right, you guys, thank you for being here. May we all get out of our overwhelm this season. My 1% for today was recording this podcast, and I'm going to go sleep and try to heal up so I can show up for the rest of the week a little bit better. All right, you guys have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
I want to invite you to come and listen to my free class, How to Overcome Pornography for Good Without Using Willpower. We talk about how to stop giving into urges without pure willpower or relying on phone filters so that you can actually stop wanting pornography. We talk about how to stop giving up after a few weeks or months. And spoiler alert, the answer isn't have more willpower. And then lastly, we talk about how to make a life without porn easily sustainable and permanent. If you're trying to quit porn, this class is a game changer. So you can go and sign up at sarahbrewer.com/masterclass, and it is totally free.